When I first heard the topic for these Sue Talks, looking forward, looking back, I knew immediately what it meant to me. It meant looking back on the words of wisdom that had been shared with me by amazing women, and in turn, sharing them with other amazing women, and a few amazing men. These are words that have helped me with difficult decisions or stressful situations, both personal and professional. And some were things that were said just once in an offhand moment, but they stuck with me. Others were sayings that I heard many times as I was growing up, but they've gained even greater meaning for me over the years. You see, there's a difference between understanding something intellectually and understanding something here, right? Sometimes this takes time. Sometimes it takes the context that we get with experience. My mother says it takes a year to get a year's experience. As an impatient person, I find this totally annoying. But it's true. You see, you can be smart or you can have a natural aptitude for something, but that doesn't replace doing it. It doesn't replace the time behind the wheel or years on the job. It doesn't replace the hours of practice or rehearsals. Because really, it's in that day-to-day slogging through it where we really learn and hone and refine. There are some things you can learn from a book or a lecture, but not everything. Sometimes you just have to dive in. That brings me to, okay, well, if I have to pick just one guiding principle, then this is it. My grandmother always said, "You'll never do it any younger." She lived to 95, so I feel like she spoke with some authority on this. And she would say it with a smile, because she knew that on the face of it, this is a very obvious statement, right? But she knew it was more. It's a challenge, isn't it, to think about, well, what is holding us back? Is it age? Is it fear of failure or concern over what others might think? What's holding you back from something that might be an incredible experience or a huge accomplishment? To this end, I have tried to live my life so that I don't have to look back and say, what if? I have on occasion looked back and said, that sucked. But believe it or not, that's actually still better to me. Because what if? Well, that means I didn't try. They didn't step out of my comfort zone. And I didn't learn anything. And besides, what if I missed out on something great? My mother says no experience is ever wasted. I'd typically hear this when I came home whining about something. You know the drill. This is dumb, this is boring, this is a waste of time. She'd say, no, it's not. You just don't know how it's useful yet. Sometimes things are useful in ways that you just can't see right now. And sure enough, when I graduated from college, the economy wasn't in great shape and I couldn't get a real job. So I took something in retail. And I didn't love it, but I really enjoyed doing the displays. And sure enough, a few years later, that experience turned out to be essential in helping me land a position as a photo stylist for Macy's. Now, not all experiences have such obvious takeaways, but I think those can be even more important because they usually teach us about people, ourselves and others. They show us that there's a different way of looking at the world or thinking about things. They teach us empathy, or sometimes just give us an appreciation for how hard something is. And these experiences, if we let them, they make us better coworkers or better managers. They help us understand our clients and help us anticipate their needs. I also think they just make us better, more compassionate human beings. You'll Never Do It Any Younger spurred me to be an exchange student at 16, to study abroad at 19, and to go back to grad school at 45. And really, it's the reason I have a creative career at all. You see, I was 26 and working in that retail job when a friend said to me, "You know what you'd be really good at? Photo styling." Her husband was a photographer and said that if I was willing to go to the Bay Area, then he was going to need help for a couple of months at the beginning of the year, and that might be a good chance to kind of just check it out. But that conversation happened at the end of November, and barely a month after I had gotten married. My new husband and I talked about it, and after a few days we decided, well, we'd never do it any younger, and we handed in our notice. I stayed in Southern California and packed us up. Eric went to Northern California and found us an apartment someplace called San Rafael. December 31st, we threw everything we owned in the back of a truck and took off the next morning. Now, I was excited, but I was actually also scared. In fact, when we drove, Eric drove the truck and I followed in the car with the cat. I drove. And we passed a sign that says, "Welcome to San Rafael." And I looked over at the cat and I said, "We're here." And then I burst into tears. Yeah. So I had to remind myself of something else that my mother has often said, which is that if an opportunity is both exciting and scary at the same time, then it's actually probably the right step. Unfortunately, if something is just scary, then you're probably in over your head. But if it doesn't make you a little nervous, then there's nothing to learn there either. But I did learn a lot. After a few months, I landed that position I mentioned with Macy's, and there I met my boss, Gail. But Gail wasn't just a boss. She was also my first real professional mentor, and she's a dear friend to this day. Gail taught me a lot of things, but one of the most important is going to sound a little odd, but she taught me that there is such a thing as perfect enough. I don't mean to imply that shoddy work is okay, but rather there is a point at which you should know that you have done your best and it's time to move on. Recognize when your time and energy and creativity and resources are better spent somewhere else. Now, if you're in a meeting, I suggest you discuss this as diminishing ROI, because as it turns out, executives don't really like it when you tell them, it was perfect enough. But perfect enough touches on something else that I think is important. You see, I feel like, particularly as women, we can fall into that trap of self-imposed perfectionism. We expect it of ourselves. We assume others expect it of us. And often, it feels like it's the only way to get ahead. Imperfection? No, that sounds like a weakness and vulnerability. Not going there. But really, to know that you've done your best and it's time to move on, and having the conviction to do it, that takes strength. That takes courage. A few years ago, an opportunity to do some adjunct teaching landed in my lap. I guess at this point you won't be surprised that I figured, I'll never do this any younger, and decided to give it a shot. You will probably also not be surprised when I tell you that it was both exciting and scary. I was really nervous the first night, but I did survive. I went back the next week. I had my notes, the students had their books, and I was ready to rock and roll. And you know what? It was a train wreck. It was awful. The students weren't following along, and then they would ask questions, but that would totally derail my train of thought. And, well, in the end, I think I forgot about half of what I meant to tell them. And I was devastated. I was really crushed. I knew I needed to rethink my tactics, but I also started to realize that I needed to rethink my mindset, because this was kind of moving from scary to a little closer to the terrifying range. And it took me a while, but I remembered something that I had seen many years ago. A friend of mine and I, we were going to pick up her kids at daycare. And the woman that ran the center had her own little girl there. She was, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4, cute as a button. But that day, well, let's just say willful. But her mom didn't yell. She didn't give her a timeout or threaten to take away privileges. She just looked at her daughter and said, "Who's the grown-up here?" "You are." "And who's the child?" "I am." "All right then, get to it." "I'm the grown-up. You're the child." "I'm the instructor. They're the students." You see, I realized that even those of us that don't consider ourselves natural-born leaders, well, sometimes we still find ourselves in positions of leadership. And you know what? You have to own it. Yeah, you do. You have to own it. It's not magic, but it does help, even today, because this opportunity is exciting, but it's a little scary. And yet, really, if I'm going to stand up here and share the words of amazing women with other amazing women, I damn well need to own it. So for the last 12 minutes, I've been the speaker, and you've been the audience. You know what? I've never done it any younger. Thank you.